Why can it be overwhelming to speak your second language? If you know enough words and phrases in Spanish, it should be easy to use them, right? Unfortunately, speaking Spanish is going to continue being a juggling act for quite a while as you learn it, almost literally. Let's talk about why and go over some mental hacks to accelerate how you can get past that overwhelm. To begin, let's do a little mental exercise to demonstrate something about how your mind works and why it's currently overwhelming to try to speak your second language on the fly. The exercise we're about to do is going to be kind of off the wall, but it's a test you can perform on yourself. To start the exercise, try to clear your mind of any distractions. Now, try to picture Indiana Jones is climbing a tree while barking like a dog to the tune of "We Wish You a Merry Christmas." That's a lot of information at once, but I'm guessing that if you focused on visualizing this information without distraction, it wasn't very difficult. When you pictured that scene, your mind accessed 4 pieces of information that were very familiar to you. First of all, I imagine that you're already somewhat familiar with Indiana Jones. Second, we're all familiar with the concept of climbing a tree and the concept of barking like a dog. And then if you know the tune of "We Wish You a Merry Christmas," your brain just had to access that file as well. And for most of us, these are very accessible mental files that your brain has had to access many times. Putting the 4 of them together simultaneously wasn't very difficult. Speaking Spanish probably doesn't feel so easy, and you're about to find out why. So here's part 2 of the exercise. Instead of that picture, now try to imagine the following. The president of Kenya is doing field research on beetles' migratory habits while making whale sounds to the tune of the national anthem of Tunisia. I'm guessing that didn't conjure a vivid picture as easily. You probably found it overwhelming or impossible to put these 4 concepts together at once. And that's why you have trouble speaking Spanish on the fly. Our brains can only handle so much work at a time, and the conscious mind short-circuits when we give it any more work than it can handle. That probably happened to you during this second part of the exercise. Even if some or all of these concepts are somewhat familiar to you, they aren't as easily accessible as the ones we used previously. And this is an analogy for the difference between speaking your first language, which is easy, and speaking your new second language, which is overwhelming. Let's use a real-life example to show how this works for speaking a language. So let's imagine that you're ordering food at a stall on the street. There's a special offer today, and you want to make sure that you get the discount. But the vendor tells you that the discount doesn't apply to your order for some obscure reason that probably isn't true. So your mission is to reason with the vendor until he gives you the discount. If this exchange is happening in your native language, presumably English, here are several things that your conscious mind can process all at the same time to make sure you argue with the vendor effectively. First, the content of what you say, the facts as you see them and why you think you should get the discount. Second, your specific phrasing to make sure that you leave no room for ambiguity. Third, your body language to show that you know what you're talking about and that you won't back down on what's right. And then fourth, your tone to strike the perfect balance between firm and calm, civil and determined. When speaking English, you can think about all these things at once. However, in Spanish, the first item in the list takes all of your mental capacity. How is it that this discount is phrased? What does that mean exactly? I heard the previous customer use a local alternative word for this food item. What was it? Let's piece together how to say $1.87 in Spanish. Oof, I need to use a subjunctive here to express intention. What was the subjunctive for this verb again? Is it a regular verb? When speaking Spanish, you may have to think about all these things at once just to get out one sentence. Most of these things come naturally in English subconsciously, leaving your conscious mind to focus on other things. But in Spanish, you have to think about all of these things consciously, which means that you're less likely to focus on your body language, your tone, and other social elements while you're speaking Spanish. If you're like me, you've been duped many times into spending way too much money while in Spanish-speaking contexts. Now you know why. When speaking your second language, your brain can get so fully occupied with the content of what you're saying that you mess it up on other things that you would normally do simultaneously, such as social cues and environmental information. If Spanish were already second nature, you could free up more conscious thinking for those other things: body language, tone, timing, and so on. But if you're not there yet, you'll need to use your brain's capacity very efficiently, or you'll get overwhelmed. According to the latest research in neuroscience and psychology, each of us has the capacity to think about 4 things at once, consciously. If you have a mature understanding of something, it counts as one item, one thing you can consciously think about along with 3 others. If you don't have a mature understanding of that thing yet, it will take up more conscious space. Imagine a juggler who can keep 4 balls in the air at once. Actually, not just balls. He can keep 4 items of any kind in the air at once. In fact, he has an infinitely large warehouse. With practice, he's able to juggle all kinds of things. Lately, he's been collecting a wide array of juggling balls, clubs, fruits, torches, you name it. However, at any given moment, he's only able to keep 4 items in the air at once. Your mind is like this juggler's warehouse. You have about 80 billion neurons in there, and that gives you the capacity to remember a virtually infinite amount of information. But that doesn't mean that you can think about all that information at once. Consciously, you can only keep 4 items in the air at once. Earlier in this video, you were able to picture Indiana Jones climbing a tree and barking like a dog to the tune of "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" because you processed it as 4 pieces of information. You're less likely to be able to picture the president of Kenya doing field research on beetles' migratory habits while making whale sounds to the tune of the national anthem of Tunisia, because those are not fully formed mental concepts for you. See, as a mental juggler, we can only juggle mental concepts that we can get a grip on. Some of these items that we try to catch are either not fully developed mental concepts, so they slip from our fingers, or in many cases, one object actually demands attention on multiple aspects of the object, which means that it's actually 2 items, not 1. Using the president of Kenya example, the second item, doing field research on beetles' migratory habits, probably didn't conjure a single concept in your mind. It was complex enough that it took up more than 1 slot in your juggling act, so you couldn't juggle that along with several other items. Now let's use another example from speaking Spanish. If you're in a conversation and trying to integrate the phrase, "I gave it to him," you may have to think about multiple things at once to say this little phrase. First of all, what is the correct conjugation for gave here? And then how do you phrase the pronouns? The translation is "se lo di." Even though it's a simple little 3-word phrase of 2-letter words that native Spanish speakers wouldn't even have to think about, you may have had to give it lots of conscious attention, and it probably required 2 or more juggling balls, or chunks, to manage it. But what if this was second nature? What if you were so familiar with Spanish sentence structures, including these weird ones where the pronouns bunch themselves up in front of the verb like this, that it's just one simple juggling ball? What if you were so comfortable with these complicated little object pronouns like lo, se, la, and so on, that you didn't have to puzzle through which ones to use? What if you were so familiar with the verb dar, including all of its forms, that you didn't have to give much or any conscious thought to using it in context, no matter what tense or mood the sentence is? Let's imagine that that's how advanced your Spanish is. Now, imagine that you have to say, "I gave it to him," and this time you're very familiar with the se lo verb sentence structure, as well as the appropriate conjugations of dar to use in any situation. You could now easily say, "I gave it to him," se lo di. I'm giving it to them, se los doy, or maybe even, I want you all to give it to me, quiero que me lo den. All without using up more than 1 or 2 chunks in your conscious juggling act. That leaves you with 2 other chunks for conveying the right body language and maybe reading the reaction of the person you're talking with, or perhaps even plotting out how you'll say the next sentence. The bottom line is that when a Spanish grammatical concept, such as a phrasal structure or a verb with all of its forms, becomes fully conceptualized and familiar enough, you'll be able to use it in a variety of ways without having to puzzle over it. It becomes what we call a mental model, something that can be treated as a single juggling ball instead of requiring your full attention. With that perspective in mind, don't lose hope as you continue to work on your Spanish. The next time you experience this mental overwhelm while practicing Spanish, remind yourself of the juggler. Tell yourself that there is light at the end of the tunnel. As long as you keep practicing and improving the grammatical models that you're learning, you will get a grip on them eventually, and your juggling act will get smoother and smoother. In the next video, we'll talk about how to form what we call Spanish mental models, fully formed linguistic units that make juggling Spanish easier and easier. By the way, did you know that there's a way to learn Spanish online using these techniques? Using the Accelerated Spanish course, you can make Spanish syntax second nature by working with native-speaking Spanish linguists who will train you to speak, understand, read, and write Spanish fluently. Accelerated Spanish is the only online course that guarantees fluency, and it gets results faster than any other Spanish course. You can start using Accelerated Spanish for free at SpanishVideoCourse.com, or subscribe to this YouTube channel to continue watching all the Spanish lessons that we publish here.